Hi guys, and welcome to Rossi Audio. Today I'm going to talk about new against vintage and old. I see in every group, and I've been asked quite a few times what I think is the best. What is the better equipment? 60s and 70s or 80s, 90s and today's equipment? Well, I'm going to take two of mine that is somewhat my personal favorites. I have the Yamaha CR640 receiver, and I have a Sherwood S8400CP. Those are my favorite, and that I have in my collection here now. Of course, there's another one I could have brought into this mix, and that is the Scott 335R. That's my probably my third favorite in this collection. So let me put my camera up, and excuse me for a little while. Okay, so basically what I want to say is I have a little sheeting paper here. The Yamaha, the Sherwood, and the Scott. I can run those up against three models that are fairly way more newer than those three that I have had, and I sold them because they were so disappointing in some ways and in many ways. I have had a Marantz SR8200. I sold it about almost a year ago. I had a Harman Kardon AVR 310. I sold that one almost a year ago. And I had a Denon AVR 588, which I sold sometimes early this year. I'm not quite sure when it was. But those three, the Marantz SR8200, the Harman Kardon AVR 310, and the Denon AVR 588, I got them. I buy stuff, I test it out, and if I'm satisfied and happy, I keep it. If not, I sell it. And sometimes I get things at auction and stuff like that. So, yeah. And then I can take and measure them up against my Yamaha, which is fully restored inside out. It is as mint as you can get it. Caps been changed, complete service, cleaned, everything. The same with the Sherwood. The Scott is untouched, never been restored. So when people discuss this online in Facebook groups or in forums or whatever, some people are of course saying that the newer stuff is better, and some people say no, the old stuff is way better. The problem is you have to have them both, and you have to test them over a certain period of time. One little 10-minute test in a room that you're not familiar with, or maybe not a good room for any of the equipment, is not going to tell you which one is better. I have used all of the equipment I want to talk about in my situation where I live, where I normally use my stuff, and I have used the same sources like CD players or turntables or DVD players. I have used the same cables. I have used basically the same equipment and the same speakers, and just the only difference is that I swapped out the new and old from what I want to listen to. And I listen to them not only for 10 minutes or an hour or a day or a week. I gave the Marantz, the Denon, and the Harman Kardon a fair chance. The Marantz was up and running in my system for a good 4 months, and I used it fairly often. And the same with the other two, the Denon and the Harman Kardon. And the same with the old ones. The old ones I switched out every now and then, and when I feel that I want to listen to something else than the Yamaha, I put that one back and I put the Sherwood up, or the Scott, or I have a Hitachi and I have other amplifiers. So I switch back and forth. And the music I'm listening to it spans from anything from like sometimes country, but most of the stuff is like rock, hard rock, and metal. That's where I listen to most of the stuff. But of course, if I'm going to do a listening test to find out what sounds better, I listen to a wider range of music. Let me tell you right away that the Harman Kardon AVR 310 is probably the biggest crap I have ever had. Biggest disappointment I have ever heard. It's not even worth a good comment. It is a weak amplifier. It's a weak receiver. It looks nice, but that's just, that's like toilet paper. It looks nice when it's new. So the AVR 310 from Harman Kardon is garbage. Total garbage. I'm sorry. It's garbage. It cannot touch any of my old receivers. I have a 18 watt per channel Technics receiver up here that plays the socks and the underwear of that Harman Kardon. And that Harman Kardon is 50 watt per channel. The Technics is 18. The sound is better, much more enjoyable, and way more punch in the lower frequency range. The Scott, the Sherwood, the Yamaha are miles ahead of the Harman Kardon. So that's out of the window. Okay, let's go to the second worst of the newer ones. And let me remind you that these are not the absolute newest. These are like maybe like 10, 12, 15 years or something like around there. The Denon AVR 588, 75 watts per channel, they brag online, per channel in two stereo mode, okay? So remember that the Yamaha is 40 watt per channel. The Sherwood is 40 watt per channel. Scott is 35 watt per channel. So they're half of what the Denon is in wattage. Yet again, the Denon falls short, just the same as the Harman Kardon. The Denon was way better than the Harman Kardon, don't get me wrong, but it cannot match the Yamaha. On sound quality, the Yamaha outplays the Denon. On power, the Yamaha is minimum equally good and maybe better on certain speakers. The Sherwood, exactly the same thing. Better sound quality, warmer, nicer sound, cleaner sound, and the bass and the lower frequency range reproduction is better. Same as the Yamaha. The Scott, however, is, half the wattage. And this is maybe the biggest surprise. Scott is the one out of my favorite three that has the best bass response. It's just awesome when it comes to the lower frequency range. And that one outplays the Denon easily as well. So far, the Harman Kardon and the Denon has both failed to play better than the Yamaha, the Sherwood, and the Scott from the 70s and early 80s. That brings me to the big monster, and I tell you, it was a monster, because when I sold it on eBay, and I had to pack this big monster, a Marantz SR8200, it was heavy, it was big, and when I got it, I expected it to play rather good. I expected a lot of power, I expected a lot of clear sound, a correct sound. In fact, to be a receiver, I expected it to play fairly nice hi-fi sound, because that's what they brag about online. Well, the Marantz SR8200 is 120 watts per channel in stereo. So think about that, 120 watt times 2. Is it more powerful than the Yamaha, the Sherwood, and the Scott? Yes, a little bit. This much. 120 watts gave you a little bit more power in the bottom end. Not much, just a little bit. Where the SR8200 failed, however, was in the mid-range. and the transition from the mid-range to the tweeter. It had a fairly nice tweeter sound. It was not like annoying or sharp. It was just right. But then again, these three have nice tweeter sound too. But the Marantz had a terrible, terrible, terrible mid-range. It didn't matter if I was listening to Celine Dion, Garth Brooks, Diana Krall, Iron Maiden, Metallica. It didn't matter. The mid-range sucked. And I used it on 6 or 8 different speaker pairs. I used them on JBL speakers, Altex, Cerwin Vegas, Marantz speakers, Advent, and several others. And the whole thing every time was that mid-range. And let me tell you, when I play my Yamaha and my Sherwood and my Scott on the same type of speakers, the mid-range changes dramatically to something really much better. I have never heard such a big difference in the mid-range before. Let me tell you, the Yamaha and the Sherwood and the Scott, they're kind of equal when it comes to the mid-range and the sound they make, but they outperform the bigger Marantz that are supposed to be more powerful and way more technically advanced. You know, it's like 20-30 year difference there. So I sold it. I could not stand the mid-range of that thing. And you know, yeah, people say, but you can't use receivers as a stereo amp or stereo receiver. Well, why do they then advertise it as a for 2-channel use? You know, you can use it, and a lot of people buy these receivers because a lot of them have a lot of pumped up wattage too. So people buy them and they use them in 2 stereo channel mode, and that's what I tested it for. Is it good for movies? Probably not. I used to be big on home theater before, and let me tell you, one of my biggest sound systems was a home theater sound system I had back in 2003, 4, 5, and 6, where I had pumped about 10,000 watts, real watts, from a home theater sound system, where we spent, we used a home theater receiver, Ala type Marantz, but it was NAD, as a preamp and decoder, and we hooked up power amplifier, PA amplifier, Pro line. It was Carver Pro and QSC, and we used PA speakers. We had 8 folded horns from B52, and we had massive center channels, dual 15, 2 of them as center. We had 4 dual 15s as front and left front and right front, and the back up behind us we had a single 15 with mids and tweeters, and all of this was pumping like crazy. We had a magazine come and do a review and a test, and they wrote 4 pages about us, and they said it was way more power and more impressive than even some of the professional theaters that you go to watch movies. So I know how to build a home theater. I know how to use it, and I know how it should sound, and I know how to use a lot of power. And this Marantz, I'm sure for a normal living room, it will play good home theater, but probably maybe not, so you never know. But in a 2-channel setup, this Yamaha knocked the socks off of that 120 watt per channel Marantz when it came to playing music in a 2-channel stereo mode. And it didn't matter if I used Altex, Cerwin Vegas, JBLs, Advents, and a bunch of other speakers that I have had here that now are gone and sold. And the same with the Scott, and the same with the Sherwood. So, you know, that brings me to the point. Is the new stuff better than the older stuff? If you ask me, my personal opinion, no. The older stuff is always better than the new stuff. Because you have to think about it this way. People who advocate for the new stuff. I have seen it online. They say, well, if you are going to compare equipment from the early days, let's say somewhere in the 70s, and let's say a receiver back in the 70s cost $800, then they say, well, you have to compare it to an $8,000 receiver today. And no, you don't. The receivers way back had way less knick-knack and shit cramped into the chassis. It was pure freaking audio. Today you have processors this and processor that and Bluetooth and all this shit that has to fit into the same space as these old ones. And when you open a new one and you take a look and you open an old one and you look at it, you see the difference. Back in the day, I mean, everything was so freaking solid and so freaking straight to the point. Today, there's so many things that has to be involved with each other. So of course the sound is suffering. I don't care what something cost back in the 70s and what something costs today. I'm comparing apples to apples sometimes and apples to oranges sometimes. I know sometimes it's maybe not the right thing to compare about, but I mean, if you are playing music and you're looking online and want to buy something used, and your options are, let's say you're looking at Craigslist or for something that is in your local neighborhood, and on Craigslist you have a Yamaha CR640 from back in the day, or at 40 watts per channel, or a Denon AVR 588 75 watts per channel, or the Harman Kardon AVR 310 50 watts per channel. Okay, they are fairly easy to compare. They have about the same wattage. The newer ones have more, and that's the all you need to know. How does it play sound? Does it have a speaker out? Does it have a volume knob? Does it have selectors, aux, tuner, phono, you know, all that? If they all have that, and they all have a volume knob that you can use, and you can hook up a pair of speakers to them, and they both give you some output in watts, that's good enough to compare for me. I don't need to know what it cost back in the day and how it equals to what today, and if you equal it, you have to go up in price today and get. That's not the point. I don't care that people make more money today and can buy something more expensive. That's not the point. The point is that you want to compare how this one plays on your speakers compared to those newer ones. And when this one and this one and this one plays better than all the new ones, what's the point? I don't care if you have to go up and buy the top model that cost you $5,000. What's the point in doing that when you can get something for $300? This Yamaha, I wouldn't sell it for less than $300. I see them being sold on eBay for anywhere between $100 and $250, unrestored. Mine is restored. I wouldn't dream about selling this for under $300. The same with the Sherwood and the same with the Scott. You can get the Scott fairly cheap, $75 to $150 in as-is condition. The Sherwood that I have is fully restored, fully clean. Everything is almost mint condition, and I wouldn't consider selling that for less than $300. So you know, think about it. You can pay somewhere between $100 and $500 and get really fairly good quality and good sound, or you can pay the same price used. Well, that Marantz go sometimes for $600, $700, $800. But you know, is there other brands, the ones that I haven't mentioned? Sure, there's a lot of older receivers. You have Fisher, you have Hitachi, Toshiba, JVC, Sony, Pioneer, Marantz, Nikko. You know, there's a lot of them out there. I'm not saying these are the answer. I'm not saying that these are the best. But it's old versus new. And in my mind, every time the old stuff wins. I don't care which model you have. I don't care if it is a little bit more powerful. Because at the end of the day, do I like the sound? I don't know. maybe not. But if you compare the ones that are fairly close in power wattage, you know, we're not talking about a 250 watt receiver compared to a 40 watt or 45 watt. We're talking about fairly close, like 40 to 80 watt, somewhere in between there. Because I've noticed it. Here's another thing, another example. I like this little amplifier down here. This is a power amplifier from Audio Source. It's an Audio Source 102 amp. Okay, it's a 50 watt per channel amplifier. These three old receivers is more powerful than this 50 watt per channel. I love this Audio Source amplifier. It was owned and built by Phoenix Gold back in the day when they still owned it. And I love Audio Source. I like their products. They have good sound and you get fairly good power. Perfect for small speakers. But a 50 watt modern thing do not outplay this 40-45 watt vintage thing. The same with the other ones. The other ones outplace this one. So my point is, you have to sit down and or stand up or do whatever you do. Start listening to products. If you can, I'm not saying that this is the answer to it, but if you can, get yourself 2, 3, 4 different pairs of speakers. And when you find your best amp, you can sell the speakers, so you don't, it depends on your wife if she lets you have that many, but if you don't want to keep all of them, at least get yourself 3 or 4 pairs. And when you have amps, get 2 or 3 different amps. Get something used, get something new, newer, and test them in the environment that you're going to have and play them in. And then you find out that which one is best for you. And that way you can decide if you like the newer stuff or the older stuff. But my personal opinion that I'm giving to you is the older stuff. If you can compare power to power and usability like 2-channel mode, there's no choice. The old stuff wins. I'm not saying that Yamaha, Sherwood, and Scott is the best. You have Pioneer, you have Marantz, you have Nikko, JVC, Sony. They're all good in the old days. Some are better than the others. This is not the topic for this one, although I have my opinion about that too. But if you want to do it, just go out and get some new stuff, newer stuff, like 5-10 years old, and then go and find something that is 25-30 years old. But don't buy anything that is like total wreck. At least get something that is in good working condition. And if you can find something that is restored, even better. And if you're willing to do that, and you sit down and you spend a month or so, and let's say you spend a couple of weeks listening to the old stuff, then you take that out and you put out the newer receiver and you spend a couple of weeks, and then after you do that, you kind of like do one day back and forth. That way then you start to know what is missing, or oh, this has more of that. You start to hear the nuances and the little details, because your brain gets used to the sound. So if you listen to something for a month, your brain gets used to it, and it's almost like it's being programmed. And when you put something on after that, you'll go, oh, something is missing, or oh my god, this is so much better. So that's my opinion and my suggestion to how to do it. So in my mind, my opinion, my conclusion is vintage and old is always better than the newer stuff. I don't care what it is. This is not about power amps from Krell or Class A or Electro Company, because those are good, but you have to pay a fortune. But we're talking about consumer products that you can go and buy in almost any consumer shop, like H.H. Craig or the other little shitty shop, I don't even remember, Best Buy. Most of these receivers you can buy in those big box stores, and I'm not talking about the higher end stuff. Don't get them mixed up here. But that's about it. Old wins. New is trash.